Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we continue to break down some of the updates from NFL training camp. And yesterday we got the news that Kirk Cousins has medically been cleared to practice. I'm gonna actually just clean up a little spelling error there. But Kirk Cousins has been medically cleared for training camp, and he, according to the Falcons organization, he's not going to be a full participant from day one. He's going to be limited to, quote, modified reps for whatever that means. I'm sure it just means to some degree, just less contact. Obviously, it's not like quarterbacks are ever really subjected to it all that much in their own training camps, but I think that it's a very positive sign for sure with the Falcons to see Kirk Cousins back. He tore his Achilles in Week 8 last year. He was starting to help turn the season around for the Vikings, who got off to a little bit of a slow start, suffered some tough losses at the end of these games, but ultimately was showing the value that he has as a legitimate, borderline top 10 quarterback. I think that a lot of people would have him definitively in that top 10 at the way he was playing last year up until his injury. And obviously it goes down in sort of the most disastrous way possible with the torn Achilles injury. He is headed into his age 36 season, so it is going to be tough. And even if he's not the most mobile of quarterbacks, of course, but even still, just mobility and being a running threat are two different things in my eyes, where every quarterback needs to be mobile. Not every quarterback needs to be able to take off up the field for 10, 20-yard gains, but you have to be able to navigate the pocket. So I feel like a lot of people are sort of underplaying it. By no means am I saying that he can't recover from this, because he's been such a solid, dependable veteran for a number of years. And sure, there's all of the primetime numbers, and I'm not gonna disagree with you if you don't think that Kirk Cousins is an elite quarterback, because I'm with you. But he is just about everything you could ask for from a dependable starter. Now, Falcons obviously paid him big this offseason. I believe the exact details of the contract: 4 years, $180 million. It's more front-loaded, a little bit less guarantees on the last couple years. It's 2 or 3 years fully guaranteed. But for the Falcons, this is sort of a similar situation. We just talked about the Steelers in last year having inadequacy from the quarterback position with a number of different options. That was the same situation last year with the Falcons, where I don't know if I've ever seen a worse plan at quarterback than what the Falcons ran out last year, where they had an opportunity. And part of the reason why I'm so harsh on the Falcons in this is it seemed like they had a golden opportunity to, try and at least make a move for Lamar Jackson, but instead ownership is talking about they're confident in Desmond Ridder. Maybe I'm a little salty because I think it would have been a really cool, almost full circle moment that, at least in my eyes, Michael Vick was sort of the original, dual threat quarterback, the one that really popularized it. I know there's others as well. You can throw Steve Young into that category, but at least in my lifetime, Michael Vick was sort of the one, and having Lamar Jackson sort of becoming the second coming of him, I just think it would have been a really cool storyline, and the Falcons kind of robbed us of it for Desmond Ridder, who, again, it's just, I don't really know what they were ever really expecting that to come into. Desmond Ridder, they took him day 2 a couple years ago. He was either a second or a third round pick. He was a third round pick, and even when he played in 2022, I didn't see much at all of, real flashes, and it came into fruition that, yeah, no, he just was not that good. The red zone possessions with the Falcons last year were atrocious, which is why, sort of similarly, the Falcons were just looking for more stability at that quarterback position, and I expect that Kirk Cousins is going to be able to provide that to some degree. And the Falcons have so many of these young skill position players that they have drafted in the first round the past few years, and they're going to have to start paying them big money if they are going to retain them. You look at the likes of Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Bijan Robinson, all three of them premier offensive positions and drafted within the top 10 in the past 3 drafts. So the Falcons understand that they're not on a time clock necessarily in terms of trying to force success, because I don't think that anybody truly considers the Falcons one of these elite Super Bowl contenders, but at the same time, they are in a wide open NFC South, and I think the NFC as a whole is pretty open. We saw the Packers be able to sort of burst onto the scene, and I'm not trying to take anything away from the Packers. They earned that run that they put together, and Jordan Love was incredibly impressive there. But last year we had the first ever 7-seed upset in the playoffs since they expanded, and sure, small sample size. I'm not trying to put too much weight on that necessarily, but the Packers also had a goal. They almost beat the 49ers in the divisional round. Like, it doesn't feel like there are any world beaters. There's not, the Chiefs standing in the way. The 49ers are a very good team, and I've reiterated this throughout the past couple weeks that I still stand by. I think the 49ers are the best team in the NFC, but I don't think that there is anybody that should be seen as this world beater that you can't get through. Like, the 49ers are the obstacle, but I also feel like there's probably some sense of teams saying, look, this is a conference that is waiting to have somebody sort of take over. And it's been the 49ers conference. Maybe we feel differently about that team and everything if they end up winning one of those past couple Super Bowls, but even them, they're going to get way more expensive in years to come, as Brock Purdy's going to need a deal. We see Ayuk and Trent Williams holding out of training camp currently. It's not like they are completely great vibes cruising into the season smoothly. They have their bumps that they have to iron out this season and for the seasons to come. So the Falcons feel like you get Kirk Cousins in there, if he can perform like a top 10 quarterback. The defense was already sort of overachieving last season to some degree. They bring in Raheem Morris as their new head coach, former defensive coordinator of the LA Rams, who I personally am very high on, and I believe that Morris can deliver a lot of success in Atlanta if they get some stable quarterback play. And that's what they're hoping for Kirk Cousins. So I feel good about them to that extent. Again, I don't know if I'm necessarily picking them to win any playoff games just yet, but we're going to have to see how Kirk Cousins looks. And getting the updates that we have so far, everything sounds like good news up to this point. So that is currently where we're at with the Falcons. Now, I feel like it is worth at least mentioning, of course, the selection of Michael Penix Jr., who they took in the first round this year, to be the successor of the Falcons. I was trying to think, or be the successor of Kirk Cousins for the franchise quarterback of the Falcons, but I was trying to think this out because, and just in terms of what it sort of looks like, the most recent somewhat similar example would be the Packers, where Aaron Rodgers, coming off of, a good season. I wouldn't say it was the best all time in the 2020 season, I believe it was, but they end up taking Jordan Love, as Aaron Rodgers seems to still be playing at a very high level, and Aaron Rodgers delivers multiple MVPs after taking Jordan Love. So I think that ultimately, that's a far more overblown conversation. Aaron Rodgers, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but Jordan Love was picked in the 20s. He came from a smaller school in Utah State. Michael Penix Jr. was legitimately incredible at Washington, played in a pro-style offense. He was letting it rip down the field. He had NFL caliber wide receivers for sure, and Dunze and McMillan and Polk, so he had his share of weapons around him, and the offensive line was pretty good. So I say all of this just not to tear Penix down, but I think even more so just to show what type of potential he has when he has a good situation around him. And he always sort of flashed that potential, even going back to Indiana. Injuries, a massive part of his overall story, and I just feel like ultimately here, the Falcons are trying to avoid the quarterback controversy with Penix, splitting second-team reps currently with Taylor Heineke, throwing Kirk Cousins into those first-team reps with the modified reps to whatever degree that may be. But, I thought I had to almost mention the Penix part of this conversation and just sort of speculate on what the future could look like there. I feel like we get Cousins for at least 2 seasons. And then from there, we'll kind of have to see. I think the out for the Falcons is after the 3rd year, but it could be after the 2nd. Again, in terms of the guaranteed, non-guaranteed, I don't have all the details right in front of me, but ultimately, I feel like if Kirk Cousins can give them multiple good seasons and just be a steady force for them, the Falcons can almost turn things around, because they've just been so stuck in middle ground. Everybody sort of was making fun of Arthur Smith. The Falcons weren't necessarily being taken quite as seriously as they would have hoped to, and they were for a lot of that Matt Ryan tenure, and that Kirk Cousins can be a very expensive but a good bridge quarterback option that also gives them some amount of chance for the next couple of years with an open NFC. Kenneth Grunfelder, our host of the GSMC Football Podcast, it's same as us, a little bit earlier. Definitely be sure to check out his show. You can check him out on the YouTube page. He asks, do you think Kirk Cousins should play in the preseason? Ultimately, the preseason is sort of, at this point, it seems like it is something that is going to only be more and more diminished. I'd say probably not. It's an interesting conversation, because I understand you want to get the full speed reps, but with Cousins at this point, he's seen enough NFL games that, yeah, it might look a little bit rocky at the start if he doesn't get these full speed game reps up until the actual season comes along. But at the same time, for Cousins, he's playing in an NFC South that it doesn't feel like there are a ton of competitors, and I'll get to Schatz' comments here in a second, but he says Falcons will be around 10-7-ish, which I agree with, and I don't think that there are really any other teams in that conference that are going to be making a real push. Like, 10 wins should win the NFC South. The Saints can maybe be in the conversation, but the Panthers, in my eyes, are still very far away. It would take, kind of a miracle bounce-back season for Bryce Young, and I still don't really see that happening. The Buccaneers won last year, and the Buccaneers, they're a solid team. They're going to be solid again, but I still, they won the division with 9 games last year. So I feel like slow play it a little bit if you are the Falcons. There's no need to jump at the opportunity and force Kirk Cousins into a situation that's ultimately going to, if Kirk Cousins goes down, they'll have Michael Penix for sure. So, I can't say their season would be totally lost, but in terms of they want to win some football games this year and establish a culture there, and I think that Kirk Cousins is imperative to that. Shots Below the Belt says, I honestly like the Falcons drafting a quarterback. It's going to be some time for the Falcons to have a potential future quarterback. Falcons will be 10-7-ish around Cousins, so their draft placement is bad. I absolutely hear that argument, and the reality is the Falcons, all the stories came out that they had Penix as the second, third quarterback on the board. At that point, when they're drafting at 8, they've already seen a number of these quarterbacks go, and you kind of have to take a stab at it if you believe in him. Now, I have some doubts with Penix, so I can see both sides of the argument here, because you're right. If everything works out in the Falcons' plan, and Terry Fontenot, I think, is their general manager, he talked about best case scenario, Michael Penix doesn't play for 4 years, which is a little bit of a crazy thing to say in terms of you just spent a top 8 pick on this guy. But I also see the point, because you talk about the positional importance of quarterback, their draft placement. Again, if everything goes to plan here for the Falcons, that Penix is going to be sort of the successor, and you hope that Kirk Cousins plays at a high level for the next few years and that he can help you win some games. And by the time that, a handful of years from now, he'll be 38, 39, 40 years old, and you can have Penix sort of seamlessly transition in, which, again, that's sort of drawing up the plan for the Falcons in a storybook. Obviously, we know the NFL and sports in general don't necessarily always work that way. We'll probably find some sort of middle ground where, again, I think Cousins plays for the Falcons for 2 seasons, maybe 3 seasons before seeing Penix take over. But let me know what your expectations are for the Kirk Cousins era in Atlanta, what your expectations are. But we're going to be taking our next break here. We just talked about Michael Penix and the fact that it's going to be a little bit for him to have an impact on the Falcons, but there are a number of rookies in the NFL who have great opportunities this season to make an impact immediately. So that's what we're going to be diving into, is the list of rookies who have the chance to shine the most in their first season. So we're going to be diving into that. But first, a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.